The snow is melting outside. Cleveland, Ohio, starting to feel like summer. At least in the month of January, it feels like summer compared to what it was. But I'll tell you what, we got a lot of hoops to talk about today, so let's get to it. It's Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty on the road. Welcome to today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. As I hit the road here, like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check the show out on social media. You can find me at Hoty Raw Takes on Instagram, Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty on Facebook, and Hoty Andrew on Twitter/X, or it's just pretty much X at this point. So check out the social media pages. The links are in the description below. We have a lot of hoops to talk to, so let's get to it as I'm about to head home from work here. Hope everyone had a wonderful day today. Let's get things started with the Cleveland Cavaliers. A big win yesterday over the Miami Heat. They defeated the Heat with a grand score of 126-106. And it was just an incredible basketball game. I give the Cleveland Cavaliers a ton of credit. It was the roughest stretch of the season. You look at their losses to the Houston Rockets. They lost one to Philadelphia, a tight game, 132-129. And then they lost to Houston again at home. So you look at that three-game losing stretch, which was, of course, the worst stretch of the season by the Cavaliers. So far, January's been the roughest month, but you know what? They're still 38-9. They're now tied with Oklahoma City because of their loss to the Golden State Warriors for the best record in the NBA. So give the Cleveland Cavaliers a ton of credit. They've bounced back. They're resilient. They're a great basketball team overall, and I think they're definitely going to be contending for a finals chip. So let's talk a little bit about the performances individually. We saw Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell really be complementary pieces in that game. Jared Allen also had a pretty nice night. Jalen Tyson was in for Darius Garland in the starting lineup. And Jalen Tyson really was effective in that game in terms of just getting some rebounds. He only had 4 points in the game, so nothing too special overall. But Jalen Tyson, I think, did a good job being a role player. You look at Ty Jerome having some key plays in that game as well. And all around for the Cavs. And this is without Dean Wade. This is without Karis LeVert. This is without all those guys. So it's been, honestly, a tremendous performance by the Cleveland Cavaliers as a whole this season. The role players are really doing their job as they should. Overall, when you look at the NBA right now, the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Oklahoma City Thunder, in terms of their record, are doing really well. So I give the Cavs tons of credit for that win. It was a resilient win. They're playing the Atlanta Hawks this evening, and that's a team the Cavs have really struggled with. I think it's going to be important that the Cleveland Cavaliers find a way to defeat the Atlanta Hawks tonight and get themselves back on track. The Cleveland Cavaliers, they've just been a resilient basketball team. They're the best team in the NBA in terms of record, tied with Oklahoma City. They've been pretty dominant just against almost all their opponents. The only two teams that they've really, really struggled with are the Houston Rockets and the Atlanta Hawks. Obviously, you know, they have a few losses here and there as well, but the Atlanta Hawks they have yet to beat this year. I think they're going to do it tonight. It's at home. The energy is going to be with the crowd. The Cavs are going to be able to have to figure out a way to get it done. In terms of their injury front, obviously Sam Merrill wasn't in the game yesterday either. I think Sam Merrill could be a great complementary piece once he gets back on the floor. You look at Dean Wade, when he gets back, I know he's going to be out for a little bit. That'll be a big factor. Isaac Okoro obviously has been out. And the question remains, too, when these guys get healthy, how can they be complementary pieces with already so many great reserves that the Cavs have available to them? And Darius Garland obviously probably going to be back in the lineup tonight as well. So I think when you look at the Cleveland Cavaliers, there's just answers like on every inch of the floor right now. And you already have a superstar in Donovan Mitchell. We're about to find out who else is going to be an all-star reserve here soon as well. And the Cavaliers, in my view, should still have 4 all-stars. I think Jared Allen should get in. I don't think he's gonna, but I think he deserves to because he has been that tremendous. But it's just been one heck of a season for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I got to go to the game against the Rockets last Saturday. It stunk. We lost that game. But honestly, it was fun to watch the Houston Rockets, too, because they've been really resilient, too, and they have a great head coach, obviously, in Ime Udoka. So giving the Houston Rockets credit for being as hot as they are. Oklahoma City, though, they're the riders out west right now. And I know they lost to Golden State yesterday, but SGA dropping 52 points in a loss, that should show Oklahoma City how much they really are worth in the NBA because they are a tremendous basketball team. I think Oklahoma City has been doing phenomenal overall all year long. Obviously, the last 2 years, when you look at the fact they don't have Chet Holmgren in the lineup, too, and they've been able to have this much success is honestly big. I think if Chet Holmgren's in the lineup, for a game against Golden State, for example. I think they win that game pretty easily, and I think they make the Cavs' life a bigger challenge with Chet Holmgren in the lineup, but we'll see what happens once he gets fully healthy and if he's back playing this season, which he should be able to later on. But the Oklahoma City Thunder, in a loss to Golden State, ended up having SGA score 52 points. That is really, really impressive, and I think that should just stamp of approve the fact that he should be the league MVP this year. I really love what we're seeing from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He is an incredible basketball player, and as I said before, when you look at that LA Clippers trade for Paul George now plays for the 76ers, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a superstar in the NBA, and the Oklahoma City Thunder have the number 1 seed currently in the West. Golden State with that win, though, does that do anything for them? I don't think it moves any needles whatsoever. Golden State has been pretty underwhelming as a whole the last couple seasons, and that's even with Steph Curry playing at a good level. To me, it's just Steph Curry's getting old. This whole Golden State, everyone's trying to do the version of Golden State from the 2010s. It's time to, I think, move past the Golden State Warriors in terms of that these are their prime years. I don't think Steph Curry and LeBron James need to continuously keep being all-stars. Although LeBron James actually kind of deserves it this year with how the Lakers are doing. But I don't see the point of keeping Steph Curry being an all-star starter anymore. I think this is just getting old. It just really is. The LeBron-Steph Curry rivalry was a 2010s rivalry. I don't think we need to make it a 2020s rivalry. And, the NBA did the whole rivalry week thing with Milwaukee and Miami even playing a game. I guess they're kind of rivals now. There's not really solid rivals in the NBA. I think that's just getting a little ridiculous at this point. I think there's rivals between players, and I think the Celtics and Lakers is a rivalry. But that's about it. I don't see too much else when it comes to rivalries in the NBA. But having said that, it's a very competitive league overall. And when you look at a lot of teams right now in the NBA, you could probably say there's a good number of teams that are probably worth getting a chip this year. You look at the Denver Nuggets if they're able to figure everything out. Milwaukee has an all-time great talent, Giannis Antetokounmpo, but everything else with them is such a mess. Do you believe in the Milwaukee Bucks to win a championship? I don't think so. The Orlando Magic have had some high points even without Paolo Banchero, but still it's looking like it's fallen off of them a little bit. Indiana, I like to give them some credit, especially Tyrese Halliburton. And I saw this on a few highlight reels the other day. He passed the ball up in the air, it misses, he got it back to himself and scored. Tyrese Halliburton is a phenomenal basketball player. I think it's still criminal. He's not an all-star starter. He's definitely going to be an all-star reserve. He's really, really good. But the problem with the Indiana Pacers is, of course, they don't really play very good defense. And that was their problem last year. They need to find some defensive players if they want to make any kind of run in the playoffs. I don't think they're going to this year. I think they kind of got lucky last year with the Knicks injuries, and they ran into the Boston Celtics, and now it's a juggernaut, so they had nowhere to go after that. But Indiana, they do have a really good player when you look at someone like Tyrese Halliburton. So I really like what we're seeing from the Pacers still overall as an organization. I think Rick Carlisle's a really good coach. But Indiana, I don't think is any kind of threat to title contention right now. But they did, even without Tyrese Halliburton, play really well against the Cavs here in Cleveland a few weeks ago. So give the Pacers some credit there. They have some resilient wins this year. Boston Celtics I view as the biggest threat to the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I'd say the New York Knicks are probably the second threat to the Cavs in terms of getting to the finals. I think obviously for the Celtics, they've been there and done that. So they really don't need to handle too much business in the regular season. Like last year, they made a statement in the regular season. They won 64 games, and the 1 seed was locked in by a long shot. I think there was still like 15, 16 games in the regular season for everybody to play. The Boston Celtics already had the 1 seed locked in. I don't even think they won 60 games yet. The 1 seed was locked in. So the Boston Celtics last year were so far ahead of everybody. They don't really need to do that again this year if they want to win a title. They just need to get to being one of those higher seeds, and they already have the talent in terms of the roster. You know you have Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown's not even an all-star starter this year, which I think is kind of criminal, but at the same time, Jason Tatum being Jason Tatum, I kind of get that. And there's so much talent in the NBA right now as well. But they have the second best bench next to the Cavs in the NBA. So when you look at the Boston Celtics as a whole, I absolutely think they should be a contending team and contending for the finals once again this year. It wouldn't surprise me if they beat the Cleveland Cavaliers in a 7-game series, despite the Cavs maybe having home court advantage in that. I'm not necessarily excited to see the Boston Celtics if we see them in a playoff series. So that's definitely something to be a little concerned about when it comes to the Boston Celtics. Now, a few other teams I would say in the NBA that are concerning in the Eastern Conference. Milwaukee, just because they have Giannis, but as I said, I'm not a believer, and I've been saying that all year. I think Doc Rivers is a big problem for them, but is that really a burden when you look at the fact of Giannis maybe likes having Doc Rivers in the building? I don't think Doc Rivers should be the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, but that's a story for a different day. I know I've talked about that numerous times, but they still have generational talent there. Is the Damian Lillard thing really working out with them? I don't really know. It doesn't seem like it is. I still think Giannis and Damian Lillard could complement each other, but clearly it's not panning out so far. But I think really coaching is a big part of that. And I think coaching is a big part of today's landscape of the NBA that we're not really talking about too much anymore. I mean, Kenny Atkinson adjusted everything J.B. Bickerstaff did with these Cleveland Cavaliers, and look at where the Cavs are now. They're being talked about in the finals conversation. Last year, we won a playoff series, and nobody was really even that excited about it. So Kenny Atkinson already changed the culture so much. And J.B. Bickerstaff, credit to him, I think he did a terrific job as the Cavs coach, but he's doing possibly a better job turning Detroit around. Detroit was a mess last year. The Pistons had Monty Williams, and Monty Williams I don't think should have ever been fired from Phoenix, to be honest with you, but he was in a horrible situation with the Pistons, and they did nothing. And then I think he shouldn't have been fired after 1 year there either, but J.B. Bickerstaff comes in and has changed the culture with the Detroit Pistons, and now the Pistons are on an upward trajectory, and that's some credit due for J.B. Bickerstaff in that situation. So, when you look at the Cleveland Cavaliers and where they are with their culture change, it's working for the better. The Detroit Pistons, working for the better. That's a big thing in the NBA nowadays, and I don't think Doc Rivers brings really a great culture with him anymore like he used to when he was even with the LA Clippers a few years ago. I mean, he had that team at 48-34 with no superstars, and LeBron James just signed with the Lakers that year. So that Doc Rivers, I think, is old news, and even the Doc Rivers that won the finals in 08 with the Boston Celtics is old news. So that's why I think he's a problem with the Milwaukee Bucks. And you look in terms of culture, too. Is Mike Budenholzer doing anything for the Phoenix Suns, in all honesty? The Phoenix Suns are awful. They really are. And they're going nowhere. I think it was a mistake for them to fire Monty Williams and bring in Frank Vogel. And then Frank Vogel goes, and he probably shouldn't have been fired either. I don't understand all the coaching firings that take place in the NBA anymore. But it is the current situation in the landscape of the game. The NBA, obviously, there's different objectives. It's not like the NFL where a winning season means essentially your job is safe. Not always, but a lot of the time that's the situation in the NFL. In the NBA, it's very different. If you win this playoff series and then fail to win that playoff series, then you lose your job, or you didn't even make the playoffs, or all that kind of stuff. It's still a winning business and a results business, obviously. And, it's such a player-driven league, the NBA, compared to everywhere else. That's a big factor of it, too. Do the players like the particular coach? You could look at John Beilein a few years ago with the Cleveland Cavaliers. That's part of why we hired J.B. Bickerstaff, is the players weren't a big fan of John Beilein. I thought it was ridiculous, personally, in hindsight, but that was the situation for the Cleveland Cavaliers. They were still awful at the time, and they were working to become a contender again like they are right now. But having said that, that was the situation. It's such a player-driven league. And so now that leads me to my next point about Adam Silver now talking about shrinking the quarters to 10 minutes possibly, and that adjustment for the NBA. I'm kind of not bothered by that, but the NBA I view as the elite basketball league in the world. It's like the Premier League in soccer is the elite soccer league in the world. Obviously the NFL, the elite football league, Major League Baseball, the elite baseball league. But, the NBA in the world is the most elite basketball league. So to me, I feel like if you're going to be playing the best teams in the world, those 30 franchises in the NBA, you should have 12-minute quarters, absolutely. That's what the league has been about. Those are the best basketball teams on the planet. So to me, to degrade the game a little bit by making it 10 minutes, I think is kind of ridiculous. I know there's all this talk about, well, then will that affect load management because you're not managing minutes as much because 8 minutes are now off of the game clock. I think it's still ridiculous in the first place to even consider load management. I think the NBA, to their credit, has actually done somewhat of a good job going after some of the teams that are doing the load management or tanking and all that, but they're not doing a good enough job of it. Like a lot of the penalties and fines, like I remember the Dallas Mavericks, I think, tanked their last game of the season a few years ago in order to get a higher draft pick or a lottery position. I guess I should say it's not the NFL where you tank and get a better pick, but it's like the lottery situation, like Major League Baseball, of course. But they lost that last game of the season, rested everybody, and the NBA fined them. I mean, the Dallas Mavericks essentially got fined. Do you think Mark Cuban and the new owners of the Dallas Mavericks care about spending a couple $100,000, maybe a few million, on an NBA fine as opposed to getting docked a draft pick maybe. Maybe you can't draft in the lottery or you're guaranteed a worse lottery pick or that kind of situation. I think it needs to be more punishable, or suspending certain players for games or something. I'm not. That's a coaching decision. Maybe suspend the coach. I mean, that's my view of it. I think you need to be a little more strict if you're the NBA on punishing teams that do tank or do this load management crap. I think it's stupid. I think a lot of the fans are paying good money to see NBA games, and a lot of them can only see one a year. So it's the right of the fan to expect superstars, unless injured, to be playing in those games. Like, I want to go to a Cleveland Cavaliers game and see Donovan Mitchell play. Whether that be the whole game or not, something else, I want to see him play a good chunk of time in that game. Unless he's injured, I want to see him play. I think that should be the only reason he shouldn't play, is if it's an injury, because obviously health comes first. Same thing with Darius Garland, same thing with Jared Allen, same thing with Evan Mobley. I think it's important to see players play in the NBA. So load management to me is ridiculous. I get the ultimate goal of winning a championship or that. In the NFL, it's different too. Injury is much more prominent in the NFL, obviously. But when the Chiefs rested Mahomes that last week of the season, I guess you're looking at the bigger goal. I get that from a coaching perspective. It stinks for the fans in some ways. In Denver, that last game of the season, they didn't get to see Mahomes, but they also blew out the Chiefs 38-0 in that game. But you can compare it to NFL, NBA all day long. Having said that, I think fans want to see players play. So I think for all sports, it's important to play your star players, because they're the money makers, as much as you can, because that's what the fans are buying their hard-earned money for. So a lot of this load management stuff is stupid, and the NBA should go after it and change rules about it. If that means shrinking the games, maybe that's the best necessary answer. But as I said, you're the elite basketball league in the world. The best players in the world come to America to play in the NBA. Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo. We talk about all the international players that are now in the NBA. It is crucial that the NBA figures this out. I really think so. I think the NBA, if they do figure it out, in terms of the load management stuff, will be great for their sport as a whole, because they have so many international players play now, as I just talked about. But at the same time, because it's the best in the world, 12-minute quarters are necessary. I just think if you're going to be the best league in the world, you got to make it somewhat more difficult. You have 82 games a season. There's talks about shrinking the regular season down. The way it is right now, I would actually reduce the playoff brackets. I don't think 16 teams making the playoffs is necessary at all. It's too many. And obviously the play-in tournament kind of makes 20 teams making a postseason now. I think that's a little ridiculous, but that's just the situation in the NBA right now. I think a lot of work could be done there. But, I think Kenny Atkinson, the head coach of the CAVS, said it best yesterday in his presser. He said, Adam Silver's been willing to tweak around with things in the NBA, try new stuff. I think the in-season tournament's stupid, but you know what? They're trying it out and seeing if it works. It's probably going to stick around, but I don't think fans have been that moved by it. I think the big thing fans will be moved by, stars playing in more NBA games, a lot less of this load management stuff, and getting things going in terms of that, and maybe some less playoff teams might be nice. Shrinking the minutes of the game maybe will help the load management a little bit, but as I said, if you're going to be the elite basketball league in the world, I don't think you should just change your game because of that. I think that's just dumb. But that's just my thoughts on the situation. All right, that's my thoughts on the NBA as a whole. I thought that was a really intriguing part for the NBA to consider shrinking the game, and we'll see if that does anything. There's also been talks of shrinking the schedule down to 72 games as opposed to 82 in the regular season. I already think the NBA regular season really has little to no meaning right now. All it means is for seeding and who's going to the lottery. That's really what it means right now. We already know who a lot of the contending teams are even before the season begins. We already know who may be bad. Like, we knew the Utah Jazz and the Washington Wizards were going to be awful going into this year. We knew the Cavaliers were going to be good. Maybe not this good, but we knew they were going to be pretty good. We knew that the Boston Celtics were going to be possibly contending for another title. Like, we know these things about the NBA. The NFL is a little different. There's a lot of teams that keep you guessing, and you don't really know until the season begins. Obviously, Major League Baseball, some of that aspect comes into play, but we always usually expect the Yankees to be pretty good. So that's my thoughts there on the NBA as a whole. Before we wrap up the show, as I said before, hopefully the Cavs beat the Atlanta Hawks tonight. I do want to talk briefly about Cam Newton, former quarterback for the Panthers, who I actually was a big fan of back in the day. I loved watching Cam Newton. He was a very extraordinary talent. I thought he had a lot of good moments in his career. Obviously, a lot of the bad moments now stick out more so. but a quote he said about winning an MVP over a Super Bowl, I thought that was ridiculous. I really, really did. And the reason I think it's ridiculous is because you're valuing your MVP trophy that you did yourself, because you had an incredible year, and props to you, Cam Newton. You did have an incredible 2015, but you would rather have that over a Super Bowl title. The way Carolina Panthers fans remember Cam Newton in hindsight now is the fact that once that big game came along, he choked in it. The Carolina Panthers had a 15-1 regular season, won 2 playoff games, got to the Super Bowl, and their offense was a joke in that entire game. The thing that got them to the Super Bowl was their offense, and they absolutely choked against the Denver Broncos that game. Absolutely, abominably choked. It was awful across the entire board. So, for me, Cam Newton saying that MVP was more valuable than a Super Bowl title, I think it's selfish. I think it's ridiculous in terms of his career, because now we look at Cam Newton's career as a whole and we look back at him choking in that Super Bowl and all the awful years that took place later. Cam Newton could have still had all those awful years after the Super Bowl year, and we'd still remember him for that 2015 season as a Super Bowl champion. But we don't. We remember him choking in the Super Bowl. So Cam Newton's career is now looked at him being an overrated quarterback, and it's probably the right way to look at it. He had one tremendous season in 2015, a couple seasons where the Panthers made the playoffs, and they had good runs. I know he was 2-0 against Tom Brady in his career with the Panthers, so there were some good moments for Cam Newton in his career, and I think he had a successful career overall. But when I look at those really, really bad moments in Cam Newton's career, his later seasons in the NFL, absolutely I think of those. I know he was injured, so that didn't help, and injury is a big thing too. That does impact people's careers. So Cam Newton was injured, and he was never the same again. But at the same time, we look at that, and we look at him choking in the Super Bowl the way he did, and now he comes out and says that MVP means more to him than the Super Bowl title. Well, I'll tell you this. The Carolina Panthers fans aren't going to remember Cam Newton for that MVP season. I mean, they may say it was tremendous and we went 15-1 and almost won a Super Bowl. But they're going to remember that you had a chance to win it all as a team, not just an individual achievement, as a team, and you came up short. I thought that was ridiculous on Cam Newton's part. That's my thoughts on it. I don't think Cam Newton's a Hall of Famer. I think Cam Newton had some great moments in his career. I thought, as I said, he was a great athletic talent to watch, but his career absolutely unfolded, and he ended up stinking up the joint. He just did. He just was never the same again. So I think that was a ridiculous comment on Cam Newton's part, but that's just my thoughts on that.
Going to be it for today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. One more thing. I did notice earlier today that there was some big news surrounding Justin Tucker. I'm not going to talk about any of that controversy yet till we get more information on that, but I did see some of those reports. So that's another big story taking place from the NFL today, that is. I hope everyone enjoyed the show on the road. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Like, comment, subscribe. Check out the show on social media. The links are below. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. And we'll be back for Short Take Saturday this upcoming Saturday. Stay tuned.